صلى الله عليك يا رسول الله وعلى روحك وبدنك الطاهرة. صلى الله عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليكم مني جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار. Tomorrow is Ashura altogether. Assalamu ala al-Husayn wa ala Ali ibn al-Husayn wa ala awlad al-Husayn wa ala ashab al-Husayn. خصوصا سيدي ومولاي كفيل الهواشم قمر بني هاشم أبا الفضل العباس عليه السلام. السلام عليكم جميعا يا شهداء كربلاء ورحمة الله وبركاته. أما بعد، يقول الله في كتابه الكريم وقوله الحق: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. فإذا انسلخ الأشهر الحرم فاقتلوا المشركين حيث وجدتموهم وخذوهم واحصروهم واقعدوا لهم كل مرصد. فإن تابوا وأقاموا الصلاة وآتوا الزكاة فخلوا سبيلهم إن الله غفور رحيم. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. Samahat Sayyid Ruhallah, my dear respected brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Dr. Jordan Peterson is an achieved and accomplished clinical psychologist from Canada and has produced wonderful work in the fields of modern sociology, in the postmodernist decorum and rhetoric, and is a major inspiration for many young men and women alike when examining the problems that young men face, the inspirations they should look up for and look up to be told to grow up and to endure the challenges of manhood properly, and has been a source of inspiration for many today, especially through his work, 12 Rules for Life, and his following work, 12 More Rules for Life. Many find him as a great source of motivation throughout their day-to-day tasks. And this has led him to become somewhat of a celebrity and an influential individual in the YouTube space, in the political sphere, people asking for his opinion as a professional psychologist, what his thoughts are regarding various psychosocial norms, for example, of the like such as the new wave of liberalism, of feminism perhaps, of thought and philosophy, and how to best address and approach this through a psychological perspective, and has been the subject of controversy for many months since his tenure as a Toronto professor, when he was accused of infringing on the rights of transgender students by not giving them their gender pronouns as they demanded. And as a result, he was subject to a lot of fame and defamation, in that he argued for freedom of speech and that free speech would be on the cultural chopping board if we were to be forced legally, as there was a law mandated or was to be mandated in Canada that subjected everyone to give the personal pronouns that an individual wants. Make it, say it, whether you like it or not, otherwise you would be oppressing another individual by not giving them the pronouns that they preferred. He stood up and said that this is not the case and this is an infringement on free speech. As a result, his debut from that moment on, 2010 onwards, became an iconic figure and became a celebrity and traveled the world and tours the world delivering talks, inspiring young men to grow up. Do not be dependent on families by the time you cross your 18 and 20s. Be someone that can provide to your family, get married, do not be an overgrown child, and so forth. In the process of this, he has been questioned on religiosity and theology as well. And he's done a famous series regarding finding God, or God through the psychological perspective, on his YouTube channel. And he amasses at the very minimum 1 million views. At the minimum 1 million views. Many people take great inspiration from such an individual. Many young Muslims also take inspiration from him. Our young brothers and sisters, however, predominantly the brothers, find him as a great source of inspiration. And many families here might not even know who he is, may never have heard of him, but their sons watch him hours online. And as a result, he has been asked through the tours and the lectures and the worldwide international seminars regarding his opinion on religiosity, on contemporary and classical history. And he was asked a few questions regarding Islam. Throughout his journey in going and crossing the world and speaking to the masses and the public, he has been asked a few questions about Islam. His questions, or the questions that he was asked, are very unique questions. What is your opinion regarding Islam? This is a unique question. Why? Because many people get asked this question, but how many of us ask an expert in the field of clinical psychology, someone that has respect for their intellect after studying it for numerous years? It's very interesting to see what they would say about Islam, because you would imagine that they are not subject to the societal norm or the stereotypical norm of the impression of Islam today. A psychologist is someone that thinks outside the box. So he was asked, what is your opinion on the religion of Islam? And he gave his response in the following, that he struggles to understand Islam. A man, as achieved as he is academically, stated that, look, I will predicate my following answers in the following, that I am ignorant of Islam. Many of us know about Islam, but this individual began his response by saying the following is a consequence of my ignorance. Meaning, what I am about to say, do not accept it as chiseled in stone. There might be some errors in it, so accept it with a grain of salt. This is actually very commendable, which is why our lecture tonight is not a reply to Jordan Peterson. Rather, it is a critique of Jordan Peterson's statements about Islam, because he predicated everything he said by, look, I am ignorant in the following, but if you ask me for my opinion, I will deliver it. This is good and condoned. Why? How many people have you seen out there? They don't know the slightest thing about Islam, but they speak to you as if they are a mujtahid, ayatullah al-uzma. They speak to you like they know everything about Islam. Suddenly, when COVID hit, everyone became an expert in the fields of infectious diseases, subhanAllah. Everyone had an opinion. Where did they get their degree? From WhatsApp University. Don't do this, don't take this, take the vaccine, wear a mask, don't take a mask. Where did you come up with this stuff? Are you an expert? Have you studied? No. Now, with the recent events that have occurred, people went from an infectious diseases expert to an amazing political analyst and everything geopolitical regarding Afghanistan. Everyone has to have an opinion. They did this, they shouldn't do that. This was right, the decision was that. The last government was this, the last government was that, and this was wrong, and this was wrong. And the person is no older than 16 years old. Habibi, if this is not your expertise, keep your opinion to yourself. And don't expect others to accept it and take it as gold, that this, it's either my way or the highway. You are entitled to your opinion. But when you decide to share it, make sure you do what? If this is not your field of expertise, we said it yesterday, reference it. If today, right now, one of our maraja comes in front of you and begins to tell you about Islam, you will never tell him, Maulana, Sayyidna, Shaykhna, show me your references, because I trust him. The man has worked his socks off since he was 10, and he's clocked his 80s and 90s. You do not ask him for a reference. Why? Because you trust him. You trust their integrity, their academic integrity, their knowledge, their years of experience, and so forth. But today, if someone is asked the slightest question on Islam, they always have to have an opinion and they expect you to accept it as fact, verbatim. This is the following. This is what Islam means. A man like him came forth and said, like Jordan Peterson, the following is what is a consequence of my ignorance. So whatever I say, make sure you accept it with a grain of salt. This is a lesson that we can take from people who are experts in this field of psychology. A psychologist knows that one day if I say something wrong, it's going to come back and haunt me, as we have seen time and time again. Amir al-Mu'mineen Salamullahi alayhi says, the best answer to a question you do not have 100% yaqeen with is I do not know. La a'lam. I don't know. Why? Because one day if someone asked you a fiqhi question and you think you know the answer and you gave the answer and it turned out to be false, this person could be worshipping Allah the wrong way because of your wrong opinion. Even if we read the fiqh and Islamic rulings in the holy month of Ramadan, what are some of the mufattirat of as-sawm? Obviously eating, the acts that invalidate the fast. Obviously eating, obviously drinking, and engaging in acts of intimacy, of course, whether halal or haram. Some ulama have said submerging oneself in water, al-irtamas fil ma'. There is always an additional factor called what? Al-kadhibu ala Allahi wa rasulah. Lying regarding Allah and His Messenger. And this does not mean deliberate lying. You could have actually believed in what you said, but you did not have confidence in what you said. You knew there was a chance this could be false. So if you told someone a fact that you thought was a fact during the month of Ramadan, but you knew that there were alternative opinions and that it can't be a fact, or that there's a chance that it can't be a fact, that time, that then and there, that moment, your siyam is batil. Your fast is not accepted. Why? Because you have to be confident in what you're saying. So this is a lesson we can learn from those who are experts in these fields, whether it's psychiatry or psychology or sociology. Always make sure to predicate whatever you're going to say with, I don't know. But if you ask me for my opinion, this is what I do know. This was one point he delivered. Hence why this discussion in our lecture tonight is not necessarily a reply to his sentiments and statements regarding Islam, Ahlul Bayt. Rather, it is a critique. He began his response like this. I am ignorant. The following is a consequence of my ignorance. But Islam, my first observation is this. It has failed to separate church from state. And that is not inherently a problem, but it is a problem relative to its, meaning Islam's, relationship with the West. The failure to separate church and state. First of all, Islam did not fail to do anything. Muslims maybe failed, but not Islam. There are Muslims, there is Islam. And Allah categorizes Muslims in two, Muslim and Mu'min. So it was the Muslim who may have erred, but the Mu'min would never tolerate making fickle mistakes. That's why Allah separates them, Muslim and Mu'min. He made the statement that Islam has failed to separate church and state. This term, I would like your attention, is what? Is synonymous with the Judeo-Christian experience and time in Europe. Because that term emerged when the church was overruling Europe to such a degree and it became an oppressive entity. That's why you had the split between the Catholic Church by Martin Luther, and then you had the rest of the denominations of Christianity emerge. The Presbyterian, the Lutheran, and so forth. The Protestants. Why are they called Protestants? Because from the word protest, the word is inside the name. Why they protested Protestants. What did they protest? They protested the fact that the Catholic Church, headed by the Pope in Rome, was taking too much power for himself. Eventually, they began to demand a tax for your house in Jannah. Imagine today someone came to you and said, you have to pay a tax in order to have your house in Jannah built. What do you mean by this? So yeah, you have a house inshallah waiting for you. You don't just pay taxes in America, you're going to have to pay taxes in Jannah. Some of us, we can barely handle paying the taxes here. You want me to now pay taxes in Jannah all of a sudden? This happened in Europe. Martin Luther stood up and he said, what is this nonsense? And so he began to released pamphlets and statements against the church. They protested, Protestant movement happened, and separated. They said we need to separate what? Church and state. This term, Islam failed to separate church and state. The term should be synonymous with the Judeo-Christian experience. Question, why didn't Islam separate church and state? Because we noticed Muslims never had an issue with the church, Islam, nor the state. This was never a problem for them to say, let us separate this. How do we examine whether Islam needed to separate or not separate the church, meaning religiosity and theology, from the modern standard of living? We look at the Holy Quran al-Kareem and the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. The Holy Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, did he separate church from state or no? Number one, let us examine this by looking into the term we mentioned. That term is synonymous with the Judeo-Christian experience, not with Islam. Rasulullah made the godly state of humanity. The godly state. What does a godly state mean? Al-Hukuma al-Ilahiyya. What does that mean? It means there will always be laws that are from Allah, that are not from the people. Meaning what? Meaning these laws can never change. Some instantly become afraid of that. A law that can never change? What if that means eventually we will have society change a bit and we need to change the law? These laws are not your day-to-day laws. These are theological, moral laws of ethics. Every society today talks about ethics. When Jordan Peterson makes the statement that the failure of church and state is what was experienced when we examine Islam, he doesn't consider the fact that he is talking about secularism. When you separate religiosity from your standard way of living, secularism, al-ilmaniyya we call it in Arabic, to live a secular life. These rules will not come from a written book, it'll come from us. So what he is trying to say is that Islam is not secular in its standard. The more secular it can become, then the better it will be for the West. Here's the problem with that logic. Secularism, as understood by any human being, is the assumption of human beings that the following should be our way to live. Because we really don't know how to live as human beings. We really do not know how to live. You, the human being, we have seen time and time again where at one point we thought it was normal to buy other human beings, to sell other human beings. It was literally a little bit over 150 years ago, you could buy a human being. Our African American brothers and sisters, they were subject to trade like commodities. It was perfectly normal. And what was this? By the law. It was legal. The Congress allowed for it. The House of Representatives back then allowed for it. The Constitution allowed for it. Why? Because this, we believed, was morally correct. Because why? Because we live in a secular-esque society. What does that mean? That we, the human, make our own rules and standard. Islam came and wanted to say that you do not go through a wave. One day this is allowed, one day this is not allowed. Your morality is not contingent on the law. Some white-haired man sitting in DC should not tell you what is moral, what is not moral, what is ethical, what is not ethical. No, because one day they told you it was totally immoral for someone of dark skin complexion to sit in the front of the bus. The next day they decided to change their mind. Adri, when does it stop? One day they said it's completely illegal for someone to espouse relations with the same gender 50 years ago. Today it's totally advocated. Go ahead, do it. Love is love. Liberalism, be as liberated as you like. And this is legally allowed. If a man wants to enter now a female bathroom, let him do so. Who are you to tell him not to? 50 years ago this was illegal. Today this is legal. When your morality and ethics is contingent on the law, you never have a solid frame of morality in your life. You, as an insan, how do you know your self-worth? By morality and ethics. I am not the same as the animal. An animal, when it's killed, it's not the biggest deal, unfortunately, although it should be if it was killed innocently. But a human, when a human is killed, that should be morally unjust. But under the secular eyes of those politicians, why does it even matter? Because they call the shots at the end of the day. They said that if you kill a dog, there's a fine. But if you kill a human, you go to jail. Why? Who said that? If you're If your source of morals and ethics is not from God, if it's from you, then why do I have to follow you all the time? Because at one point you told me it was okay to buy another human being until you made them 3/5 of another human being, the 3/5 compromise, such that they can be able to vote and be involved in the judicial college as we understand it, the electoral college. Where does your morality come from? It's always going to change. Every 50 years, we have new morals all of a sudden. 18, getting married, perfectly legal. 17 years and 11 months, you will be sent to jail if you get married. Who makes up these rules all of a sudden? Morality should not be contingent on white-haired politicians sitting somewhere in a district. They should be what? Contingent on Allah. They are fixed and they never change. When Allah says this is illegal, it's illegal ila yawm al-qiyamah, for lack of better words. This is not just illegal, it's haram, a sin, and you will be held accountable for it. How many people have committed actions against humanity and simply have gotten away from it? Hitler, the common narrative is the man killed millions of people, then he killed himself, that's it. To the atheist, Hitler wakes up, it's one big circus, he dies, lights out, that's it. No yawm al-qiyamah. No hisab, will not be held accountable, will not be trialed and judged by Allah. In a secular world, if you can get away with it, you did it. Congratulations. You really did it. You did what you wanted, you accomplished, you were successful, and you didn't become subject to a free and open trial. You achieved what you wanted to achieve. You won at the end of the day. Rasulullah came to instill the hukuma al-ilahiyya, the godly government, which is what? That there are rules that will never change. When I tell you killing is a sin, it is not just a sin in our little land. It is haram until the day of judgment. Secularism, where it has its benefits, according to many researchers and scholars and ulama, it also has its flaws that will never be addressed and answered. You can never tell me that stealing is wrong objectively, because at times a person needs to steal to live. Then when do things become objectively wrong? It's hard to dictate on a secular level. In fact, it's impossible. Unless you have scripture from above telling you the following should not be allowed, then you have a reason from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Therefore, Islam never sought to separate church and state because, number one, that term is not associated with the Islamic experience. It's associated with the Judeo-Christian experience. Secondly, Rasulullah wanted to bring forth fixed laws where he would never change them because he doesn't make these laws. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made the laws. Thirdly, this experience of church and state, as we are witnessing it, has its flaws, and many people will come to add and implement new rules, new changes, but it has an endless cycle. Everyone will have their own opinion. One day someone says it's immoral to bring human beings from a war-torn country and they might make the Muslim ban. The next day another administration might say, no, that was immoral and this decision by accepting them is moral. Even the own powers and authority cannot even agree on morality and ethics themselves. The only source of ethics should come from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is exactly what Islam came to provide. The second claim Jordan Peterson made was that Muhammad was a warlord. And I do not know what to feel about that. Muhammad, sallallahu ala hubbihi, sallu ala Muhammadin wa ala Muhammad. He said that Muhammad was a warlord, and I don't know how to feel about that. Number one, an academic person should not use words that are very direct like this. You should use neutral words. You could have said Muhammad was a very accomplished strategist, and you would have ended up with the same meaning. But you said Muhammad was a warlord. Why use that negative meaning with its negative connotation? I can agree, Prophet Muhammad went on wars, in acts of self-defense, of course. But why call him a warlord? That term always has a negative connotation. It's likely because of the colleagues of Jordan Peterson, such as Majid Nawaz, Ian Hersey, Sam Harris. These people are fragrant Islamophobes. They are blatant Islamophobes. But the man has a bit more self-integrity than they do. And so instead of attacking Islam outright, which I don't even believe is his agenda, rather by being influenced by these colleagues, made it very clear that, look, Muhammad was a warlord, and I don't know how to feel about that. I really don't know. It's unsettling. You know what I say? I actually don't know how to feel about that too, because he wasn't a warlord. Look at warlord online today. Type in Google warlord. You will find the time of the experience of the Republic of China and the civil wars that happened by many leaders who just killed many tribes and killed and killed and killed, and that's all they wanted. Another warlord in the list of warlords you will find is Holako Khan, the famous Mongolian leader that sacked and killed and pillaged many people. You will also find in that list Joseph Stalin and Adolf Hitler. Rasulullah should never ever be compared to these individuals, nor even be said in the same sentence as these. A warlord are these individuals. Furthermore, after you critique your statement, was not a warlord, had wars, but not a warlord, he added the following comparison. Jesus, call him whatever you want to call him. He was everything except a warlord, but Muhammad was a warlord. Jesus, you can have whatever opinion you want, but definitely warlord was not him. So he makes that false comparison. I say false, why? Because if you examine the lives of Jesus and Rasulullah, it's apples and oranges. Apples and oranges. Jesus was a private citizen living under the Roman Empire. Judea was under whose empire? Jesus or the Roman Empire? Jesus lived under the Roman nation, and according to the Bible, even was subject to paying taxes. Rasulullah was head of state. You have different polar opposite. When you are the head of state, you are going to receive threats. You, as a responsible leader, have to defend yourself. Which leads us to our additional point. Not one war from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam was in the offensive. He never began jihad ibtida'i. You will never find in the either major battles, be it Badr, Uhud, Khandaq, and all these battles of Hunayn, Khaybar, not Ahzab. The major battles were all in self-defense. And even the minor skirmishes, meaning threats here and there, whether it was in Mu'tah or Tabuk, all of these were self-defense. Tell me the truth. Is a warlord someone who just sits and defends himself? At that point, we are all warlords. If anyone comes and threatens you, your mother, your property, your life, are you going to defend yourself or not? Question, what if you have to defend yourself over 80 times? Would you become a warlord then? No. You would be considered someone that should be praised. Good job, you stood up for yourself. And alhamdulillah, in this country, we have the following rules in our Bill of Rights. Our understanding of the right to defend yourself, the Second Amendment right. Why is this there? Because we appreciate and understand that we have citizens that can defend themselves. And if you see injustice, stand up for yourself. This is exactly what Rasulullah was doing. He never initiated battle. Not once in his life, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam, throughout his 63 years he lived, not once did he begin a war. You know what he would do? He would end wars. He would stop battles. Then someone might say, how come in the Holy Quran we find the scariest verse we have ever seen? Which verse? Surah At-Tawbah, the 5th ayah, chapter 9, verse number 5. فَإِذَا انْسَلَخَ الْأَشْهُرُ الْحُرُمُ فَاقْتُلُوا الْمُشْرِكِينَ حَيْثُ وَجَدْتُمُوهُمْ. Jordan Peterson probably read this verse. And when the sacred months have passed, then kill the mushrikeen, the disbelievers, wherever you find them, and take them, grab them, siege them, and kill them. Why doesn't he continue the ayah? فَإِن تَابُوا وَأَقَامُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَآتُوا الزَّكَاةَ فَخَلُّوا سَبِيلَهُمْ إِنَّ اللَّهَ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. This verse, first of all, there's a context. This verse was revealed for a particular group of people, not for all time. Yes, the Quran is for the entirety of the human timeline. But this ayah was relative to a situation. The Quran is two. Ayat relative and ayat fixed for all time periods. Which is an ayah that is relative? An ayah that is relative is, for example, this ayah, that there's a group of people that have betrayed you and committed treason. Take them and end them, for they committed treason. What about an ayah that is fixed? Inna anzalnahu fi laylatil qadr. Every time laylatul qadr will happen, this ayah is for all of eternity as well. This ayah right here in Surah 9, chapter 5 or chapter 9 verse number 5, you find it was revealed for the mushrikeen that have betrayed Islam. When Banu Bakr killed Banu Khuza'a, Rasulullah made a peace agreement with Quraysh, said to him, for 10 years we do not fight, okay, we're done and sick of fighting. The tribe Banu Bakr from Quraysh killed members from Banu Khuza'a, no more peace. And this is the only surah in the Quran that begins Bara'atun min Allah. No more peace and no Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim either. No more mercy. This is treason. After you killed us, after all of this, but brothers and sisters, this verse, it should not be seen as a violent verse. It should be seen as a merciful verse. Ironically, هذه الآية, this is a merciful verse, not a violent verse, because it begins, فَإِذَا انْسَلَخَ الْأَشْهُرُ الْحُرُمُ. After the sacred months have passed. What are the sacred months? Rajab, Dhul Qa'dah, Dhul Hijjah, Muharram. 4. These months you do not fight and kill. So what is Islam saying? Give them 4 months to think about their actions. There is someone that's a warlord. Does he give people 4 months just to think about their actions? So if they say sorry, then they do not be killed. Is that person a warlord? 4 months, just let them reflect. And if after the 4 months, they still act upon their vision and behavior of treason, even after killing and making an agreement, we will not do this, then grab them, find them, end them. No more peace after all of this manslaughter and innocent killing. But even then, فَإِن تَابُوا, but if they repented, even after all of this, look how Rahim Allah is in this verse. Even after all, if they repented, وَأَقَامُوا الصَّلَاةَ, and they worshipped their Lord, وَآتُوا الزَّكَاةَ, and they gave charity to those who were in need, فَخَلُّوا سَبِيلَهُم, then let them be on their merry way. إِنَّ اللَّهَ, look how this verse ends, إِنَّ اللَّهَ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ, Allah is forgiving and Allah is merciful. Allah is talking about these horrible individuals and He's still giving them a chance of repentance. Is this someone that can be seen as a warlord, brothers and sisters? Impossible. I would wish that people of the likes such as Jordan Peterson or his colleagues would just open this Holy Quran and read the verse with its context, not just the content. You see the content, but read it with its context. Read the tafasir as well. He then adds towards the end that Rasulullah, or the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam, initiated through his warlord-esque behavior, initiated expansionism of the likes which were precedented and you have never seen before in human history. The latter is correct, the former is incorrect. The latter, expansionism, did happen. Unprecedented expansionism. The likes of which we have never seen in history. I agree, that happened. But Rasulullah did not initiate it. Rasulullah did not do it. Because when did these futuhat al-Islamiyya, they call them, when did these expansions happen? They happened right immediately after Rasulullah died. At the second he died, you had cases of expansionism. And you had cases of killing individuals who simply did not accept Islam. Rasulullah never killed a person who did not want to become Muslim after Islam was presented to them. He just left them be. But once we see Rasulullah die, the first Khalifa, Abu Bakr, begins the attempt of killing those who did not accept the way of Islam. They call them Hurub al-Ridda, the apostasy wars. Meaning these individuals, they are considered apostates. Kill them now. How did they become apostates? For example, they would not give the zakat to the first ruling authority. No zakat to you. Why? For example, they thought that you were not the Khalifa. It was meant to be Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib. And this happened to a man known as Malik bin Nuwayra. The man did not want to pay his tax. He said, no, my huquq don't go to you because I don't believe you're the Khalifa. Go to Amir al-Mu'mineen. This man was killed. Khalid ibn al-Walid was dispatched by this individual, and this man had to be ridden away. Why? Because certain acts in fiqh, if they are not done, that is tantamount to making you a kafir, even though you still believe La ilaha illallah. So for example, if you do not give the huquq to the hakim al-shar'i, to the khalifa, you have committed kufr. This is not what the Shia believe. I just make that clear. We don't believe if you don't pay khums or zakat, you become a kafir. La. But there are certain actions in that Salafiyistic mind view, in that Wahhabiyistic mind view, that if you do not do them, even if you say La ilaha illallah, you became a kafir. One of them is this element by not giving the huquq where it needs to be, the khums or the zakat and all the obligatory dues. So these expansionisms happened after the Prophet died in the Hurub al-Ridda, the apostasy wars, especially in the tenure of the second Khalifa of Islam, Umar ibn al-Khattab. The individual wanted to expand Islam, and there's a good way to expand Islam, but not by the sword. Islam reached Iran. I have a friend, when publishing a post, or actually a lecture on Arab supremacy in Islam, he left a comment on my lecture. He is an Iranian brother. He said, look, I understand supremacy doesn't exist in Islam. If there's a religion that has no notion of supremacy, it's Islam. But I hate the fact that Islam was forced in Iran. I, as an Irani, I hate the fact that Islam was forced by the second Khalifa. It was forced. Kisra was killed. These individuals had Islam brought to them by the sayf, not by the qalam. He's like, I would have just accepted Islam if I lived back then. I would have loved it. But because I was forced into it, I don't like that. And Islam is the religion that said, La ikraha fid deen. There is no compulsion in religion. I saw that comment. Later on, I came to look back and reply back to him, and he had deleted it because he got a lot of hate messages. But it made a lot of sense to me that I just wish it wasn't forced on me. Did the Ahlul Bayt sanction this? Because Jordan Peterson made that claim that the Prophet Muhammad initiated expansionism. The Prophet never once expanded Islam by the sword. Do you know how he did it? By the pen. He would write. He would write to Kisra, king of Persia. He would write to Muqawqas, the patriarch of Alexandria. He would write to Qaisar, the Caesar, the leader of the Byzantine Empire, and he would invite them with a beautiful message. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, min Muhammad Rasulillah. I send to you the message of La ilaha illallah. Accept that way. Tuflihu, you will become victorious. Look at the beautiful decorum. Look at the mannerism. Not by ishhad, or else we will kill you. This does not exist in accordance to Islam, Ahlul Bayt. Some say, then why did Imam Ali allow it to happen? He was allowed, he lived in the Muslim nation. How was he so complacent with it? Who said he was complacent with it? Imam Ali lived under this establishment, yes, but he did not get involved directly. That's why for 25 years, Imam Ali, all he was doing was serving the community by himself, building wells and planting trees. He would plant trees and build wells. These trees and wells, eventually his grandchildren, starting with Imam Zainul Abidin, would take the fruit and the produce of it. That's where the Ahlul Bayt got a lot of their money. You hear the stories about the Ahlul Bayt giving one man 10,000 dinar. This man 100,000 dirham. This man so much money. Where did they get all that money from? From the wells in Yambu', where Amir al-Mu'mineen would plant, and the trees he would plant, alayhi salam. This came as a wonderful investment later on for the Ahlul Bayt. Imam Zainul Abidin himself, ahadith say, he himself freed 100,000 slaves from Ethiopia. How do you free that many people, especially back then, if they were bought and sold and bought with a market and economy? He had that much money that his great-grandfather, Ali ibn Abi Talib, made sure to put the investment in. That's what he was doing for 25 years. The Ahlul Bayt later on would use it for humanitarian purposes. Imam Ali would not be involved. And he would get involved to the smallest degree until he was really necessarily needed. So for example, the second Khalifa might ask him, if we want to expand properly, how do we do it? Imam Ali would give his input. And it reached the point where the second Khalifa made the claim very loud and very clear. Lawla Ali, lahalaka Umar. Had it not been for you, I would have perished. Your judgment is beneficial. Your rationale is necessary. Does this mean he necessarily sanctioned and allowed and accepted this type of government? No. Then why did he get involved? Because Imam Ali would always get involved for the betterment of Islam, Ahlul Bayt. If Islam is best served by talking to the authority, then of course I will talk to the authority. That does not mean he sanctions and justifies all of the actions. The Ahlul Bayt did not sanction the expansionism. And that is why, brothers and sisters, today, when you ask our top ulama and maraji', I had the pleasure personally, me, myself, you can take it from me. In 2018, we visited Grand Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Sistani, Hafidhahullah, and we asked him the question. We asked the question to Sayyid Ali Sistani, but his son was next to him, Samahat Sayyid Muhammad Rida Sistani, and he answered for us, not Sayyid Sistani, his son. We asked him, Sayyidina, what is Islam's opinion on the expansionism that happened? Al-Futuhat al-Islamiyya. Is it Shar'i? Was it good? Is it something we should be proud of? Because Islam did spread, but does the means justify the ends? Does the means justify the ends? The means wasn't that good necessarily. Sword, bidhabih, qatl. But the end, eventually Islam got there. The Sayyid answered on behalf of his father, Samahat Ayatollah al-Udma Sidi Sistani. He said that any form of expansion that was not done with the supervision of Al-Muhammad is not something you can blame Islam for. Any expansion that did not have the Ahlul Bayt supervise it, whatever error they do, you cannot blame Islam for it, because no ma'soom was watching over what was happening, which is a logical, rational response. If you find an error in Islamic history, expansionism, killing, if the Ahlul Bayt were not behind this, supervising it, you cannot blame Islam for it. And indeed, the Ahlul Bayt were not behind these expansions that happened, these futuhat, whether it was in the first, second, or third tenure of the Khulafa. Umar ibn al-Khattab even, how does the adhan go? Allahu Akbar, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah, ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa Muhammad. The additional mustahab, ashhadu anna Ali wa Allah, ashhadu anna Ali hujjatullah, hayya ala salat, hayya ala salat, hayya ala al-falah, hayya ala al-falah, hayya ala khayr al-amal. Hasten to the greatest actions. He removed hayya ala khayr al-amal. Why? Because hayya ala khayr al-amal, come to the greatest action, is salah. He removed it to make the impression that the best of a'mal is jihad. Hayya ala khayr al-amal, al-amal al-khayr is jihad. So the separation, that is why today our respected brothers and sisters from Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah do not say hayya ala khayr al-amal. None of them say it. They skip that part. It was removed and deducted and separated by the second caliph for the purposes of motivating expansionism. And this is not coming from us. Later on you read the works of Muhammad bin Idris al-Shafi'i, the famous Imam of the Madhab, Imam al-Shafi'i. He uses this argument that was done by Umar ibn al-Khattab, and he makes the following fatwa, that every year, at least once a year, the Muslims should conquer a land. Even if it's not a bad land, at least conquer them. This was a fatwa made by Imam al-Shafi'i that once every single year, the Muslim nation and Khilafah should go and conquer a land. Even if they were not bad people, conquer them. Spread Islam there, let it forcefully get there. Where does this all stem from? From this logic of expansionism. Question, did the Ahlul Bayt sanction this? Absolutely not. Which countries entered Islam without the use of the sayf, the sword? Yemen. دخلت الإسلام محبة بعلي ibn Abi Talib. Yemen, Amir al-Mu'minin was sent to spread the good word of Islam. They loved him so much, not a drop of blood was spilled, and they all entered Islam. Some say in addition, Masr, Egypt, they entered Islam without the means of the sword in addition. Amir al-Mu'minin himself, when he became Khalifa, finally, his right was meant from day one. But finally, when he has that opportunity, he spreads Islam. But notice, not one war from the eastern side of his nation. Because we read in Tabaqat bin Sa'ad and other works, or Al-Futuhat and other material, that he made what is called Al-Ittifaq with what? Muluk as-Sin, or Muluk as-Sind rather. He made a peace agreement with the kings of the east. Sind is that Pakistani region today. It's a province, Sindhi province. Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib made a peace agreement with them. All of his wars were from the people of the west, Muawiyah, not from people from the east. The likes of going towards Khurasan and India and that Punjab region at that time, in that Sindhi region. Not one war from that side, but many wars from Muawiyah on that side from the west, ironically. And the wars came from a man who claimed that he was Muslim, self-proclaimed Muslim. And he had that battle in Jamal, and he had that battle in Siffin, and he had that battle in Nahrawan from 3 different groups of people that all said La ilaha illallah. But not one battle, read Islamic history, not one battle from anyone from the eastern side of his nation. Why? Because the Ahlul Bayt don't want to spread Islam using the sword. They want to spread it using the mantiq and logic and peace. Therefore, when we gather all of these presumptions presented by Jordan Peterson, we make the following claim, that number one, it is very commendable that you began your statement by saying the following is a consequence of my ignorance. This is very respectful, that you know that the following you are ignorant in, but you will still state your opinion, which you have every right to. But you make that clear that you are ignorant such that it doesn't become fact or is not taken as fact. Number two, by stating that Jesus was never a warlord, but Muhammad was, that's a problem because you're talking apples and oranges. Jesus, we mentioned, was a private citizen. He paid taxes to the Roman Empire that conquered Judea. Rasulullah was a head of state. And even in our country today, alhamdulillah, we have the concept of defending oneself. The Second Amendment right of self-defense. Rasulullah, that's all he ever did, defending himself. Lastly, the issue on the separation, or the failure rather, to separate church from state. We understand that morality can only come from above. Because if you make your morals and ethics contingent on some old politician sitting somewhere in a district, then you will always have problems, because one day it was perfectly ethical to purchase other human beings and sell them. Today it has changed. You get your morals and ethics not by individuals wearing suits, but by a Rahman ar-Rahim who makes his rules and never wavers and changes them. Through these reasons and explanations, inshallah ta'ala, we can enlighten those who are curious to learn more about Islam, especially from those who listen to the likes of Jordan Peterson and the others. Those who have a large following should be careful with who they are listening to and be wary of what is being said. That all being said, inshallah ta'ala, we would like to extend an invitation, because he had made the final conclusion and statement concluding that, and I want to learn more about Islam and study more to know whether I believe in is wrong or not. And it is important to know if I am wrong or not. Now I extend this invitation. If this reaches you and if you learn more, inshallah ta'ala, this can benefit you and enlighten you. And stay away from the likes of Sam Harris and Ian Hersey and Majid Nawaz. These people clearly come with a motive and an agenda, an Islamophobic, a blatant Islamophobic, obvious agenda. If you want to be a munsif individual, someone who is unbiased, then begin by searching, by being neutral and not being influenced by those who have presuppositions or stereotypical or bigoted information. By doing so, you will come with the best knowledge and purest, unfiltered piece of source that you can ever come across. And that being said, brothers and sisters, leads us to this final transition. Today, brothers and sisters, there is a massive attempt to ruin the image of Islam, whether it's by influencers, whether it's by popular speakers, whether it's by doctors. There has always been a massive attempt. But even through these attempts, brothers and sisters, you can see holes in their arguments. Do not be shaken by whoever speaks eloquently to you online. Do not be shaken. You will always find holes in their arguments. And this was something Yazid bin Muawiyah la'natullahi alayhi tried to do. When he dispatched his men to kill Sayyidu Shuhada, he later on, after the killing happened, brothers and sisters, after Karbala happened, not only did the Ahlul Bayt of Aba Abdullah return to Sham, or go to Sham rather, it wasn't just them. It was also the killers. We seem to forget that those who killed the Ahlul Bayt in Karbala also came back with them to Sham. Yazid, la'natullahi alayh, gathered all the killers of Imam al-Hussein. When we read in the ahadith, we see him gathering them in one room. And he is having a meeting with them. He's having a meeting with who? The likes of Umar bin Sa'ad, the likes of this Khuli or Khuwalla individual, the likes of Harmala bin Kahil, and all of these mala'in. He's seated with them in one room, and at the helm of this table, Yazid bin Muawiyah. Do you know what he is doing when he's seated with them? He asks them, tell me, what did you guys do in Karbala? What happened? They begin to tell him. One man says, Yazid points, he says, what did you do? What was your role? Umar bin Sa'ad says, I was the commander, as you know, and I called all the shots. At the end, we managed to kill Hussein. He never gave bay'ah. He points at another man. So what did you do? This man says, I didn't do much. I just had a sword and I severed the right hand of his brother Abbas. He points at another man and says, what did you do? Says, I was responsible for blocking the water from the family of Hussein. and he is praising all of them. He then points at another man. But when he points at him, the response he got even made Yazid surprised. Now imagine what can make Yazid bin Muawiyah surprised, this maniac. He points at Harmala bin Kahil, la'natullahi alayh. And he says to him, "Oh Harmala, what did you do? What was your role in Karbala?" You know what Harmala said? He just said this line. He said, "Hussein had a baby." La ilaha illallah. Said Hussein had a baby. Ahadith say Yazid was sitting like this. He instantly sat up like this. And then he said, "What did you do? After that, what did you do?" He said, "Hussein had a baby. He, Umar bin Sa'ad, ordered me, take the arrow that you used to slaughter a camel with," which is a large arrow. Some of them say 3-pronged arrow. "Now place it over the fire. Hussein has that baby. We saw him. He went to his family and he brought back this baby. Lady Zainab alayha salam delivered the baby Aliul Asghar to Aba Abdullah. She said to him, 'Oh Hussein, his mother is too embarrassed and shy to ask you to ask them for water for her son. Can you go and ask, can you provide the water to the baby? That's it. If us men and adults have committed crimes, then the baby is innocent.'" Aba Abdullah got the child and he went to the battlefield. He's holding it's his son, the son of Rabab. He goes and he says to the people, "O people, O the family of Al Umayyah, we want you to at least consider, we might have been criminals, the adults, but what is the crime of a 6-month-old baby?" Some of them said, "Give him water." Others said, "No." Aba Abdullah put the baby down on the floor. Then he went back and walked. He says, "Fine, maybe you are afraid of me, then I'll leave him by himself." He goes and he comes back. Nothing. He then picks up the baby. He asks the 3rd time, "Please give him some water." He doesn't even have the energy to cry anymore, and his mother doesn't have the milk to give to him any longer. They say that he held the baby. Harmala is narrating the story. Yazid says, "Then what did you do?" He then says, "I got the arrow." And Umar bin Sa'ad told him, "Shoot the baby, kill him right then and there." "I killed the baby of Hussein." Yazid looked at him and he said the line, "Wayhak. لقد انتصر علينا الحسين بطفله." How could you? Hussein won over us through his طفل, his baby. Because history will look at us and they will not say that they just killed men. They even killed babies. You can never justify that. Even Yazid bin Muawiyah la'natullahi alayhi was shocked in this moment. And Harmala, when he picked up the arrow and he shot the baby of Aba Abdullah, they say the arrow hit the baby and they narrated that he began to flap his hands like a bird flap its wings from the heat of the arrow. Aba Abdullah didn't know what to do in that moment. He began to walk 5 times back and forth, and they see him thinking, "What is he doing?" But Aba Abdullah doesn't know what to do anymore. Do I take the baby back to his mother with the arrow in the neck? All of you who have babies will resonate with this. Do I take the baby to the mother with the arrow in his neck? Or do I do with him? He takes the baby back to al-Masa'ib Zainab. He takes the baby to Lady Zainab alayha salam. Salamullahi alayki ya Zainab. How much tragedy did you see? The baby goes back to her alayha salam. When Aba Abdullah later on buried Aliul Asghar, the men of Umar bin Sa'ad poked their spears to the earth trying to find the body of the baby. They even took the baby with them to Sham. Eventually, when the family of Aba Abdullah returned to Karbala, one mother went to Abbas, one mother went to Qasim, another woman went to their child, but they couldn't find Rabab. Lady Zainab was looking, Imam Zainul Abidin looked, they found her in the middle of the field. They said to her, "Sayyidati, what are you doing?" She said, "Now I have milk to give my baby. I am looking for him. I want to find my beloved boy. Eventually they brought the head of Abu Abdullah to the grave of Hussein. When Imam Zainul Abidin dug open the grave and he put the head of Sayyidu Shuhada in with the body, a hadith say that the head began to speak, saying, "At-tifl, at-tifl, the baby, the baby. Put the baby on my chest." Abu Abdullah wanted his boy back with him. They brought the head and they brought the boy and they placed the baby of Sayyidu Shuhada on his chest and they placed his neck on his neck and they buried them together. And we are reminded of the ayah in the Holy Quran, بِأَيِّ نَفْسٍ قُتِلَتْ, for what crime were the babies killed? أَلَا لَعْنَةُ اللَّهِ عَلَى الْقَوْمِ الظَّالِمِينَ. إِنَّا لِلَّهِ وَإِنَّا إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون والعاقبة للمتقين. فرج عنا يا Allah. Brothers and sisters, with the tear flowing, let us raise our hands and make dua to our Lord to help all of our sick ones and raise us with Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. Allahumma inna nas'aluka wa nad'uk bismika al-azim al-a'zam al-azz al-jall al-akram. Ya Allah, 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 Ya Allah. اللهم يا مقلب القلوب والأبصار ثبت قلوبنا على دينك. Oh Allah, we ask you to raise us with Hussein and his family on the day of judgment, to allow us the ziyarah of Abi Abdullah in this dunya and his shafa'ah in the akhirah. Oh Allah, we ask you to heal all those who are sick on behalf of the one sick in Karbala, Zainul Abidin. Oh Allah, we ask you to never separate from us the love of Hussein and to allow us his intercession. We ask you, Ya Allah, with a surah al-Mubarakat al-Fatiha, but before it the loudest of your salawat.